Welcome to Shop Talk Live. A year ago today, we had our first episode of Shop Talk Live, literally 12 months ago. And since then, the reach of Shop Talk Live across all the episodes has expanded from 0 countries a year ago to 80 countries today. So it's been quite a journey. It's going to be an exciting episode today. Let me bring on my co-host, Dan Harrell. Dan, perhaps you could join me, and I'll bring you in for when we tee up what this episode is about, because you're fluent in geek speak. You use that term, not me, when we were chatting just now, and you're going to help me hold my hand.
That's correct. I definitely speak fluent geek
through this episode. So Dan, you're Chief Innovation Officer at Invenco. 25 years experience in the global retail and payment industry. Before Invenco, you were with Wayne for many years, and before that, all the good people always seem to come from Radiant. Is that something which is just my experience? But you were with Radiant Systems before that, weren't you? Now, of course, NCR.
That's correct. Yeah, it was quite the family we developed back then, and it was an interesting group of people who were very focused on trying to drive innovative solutions.
Absolutely. So today's episode, Dan, dealing with a digitally disrupted world, how should convenience and roadside retail respond to that? We've got two interesting case studies, haven't we, from Jiffy in London, and obviously, if you like, at the other extreme, really, in terms of size of business now, MOL Group presenting their digital strategy. So what are your thoughts on today's case studies?
Well, I think it's interesting because they highlight what I've seen over the last 25 years, which is all of these different changes that we see in consumer needs and demands, and how technology has evolved and created new tools that we can adapt and basically take retail to another level to address those ever-changing needs.
Yes, and thinking about our first guest. We'll it's going to be interesting to, I guess, to look at what businesses that haven't got legacy systems can do in this space, isn't it? I mean, this is one of the big challenges, I guess, for our sector, isn't it?
Yeah, it's been interesting to watch, especially how COVID has impacted the world in terms of consumer demand and things that they want. So this concept of needing products, very quickly, exactly when you need them. It just so happened that we had the right technology at the time to be able to adapt and be able to provide those types of solutions to the consumers that needed them.
Yeah, well, let's start talking that through with a live example. So let me welcome Vladimir Kholiaznikov from Jiffy. Vladimir, perhaps if you could join us, I'll perhaps I should call you Vlad. If that's okay?
Yeah. Hello, everyone. Thanks, Dan.
Welcome. Let me introduce you properly, Vlad. So obviously we'll talk about Jiffy London in a moment, but you're still currently food tech director for X5 Retail Group out of Russia. You lead on demand delivery services for X5. Now that's significant, and obviously many people will know why. Let me explain for those who don't know much about X5. X5 is the equivalent of Tesco in Russia, although it's a lot bigger than Tesco. You've got 17,000 stores. You're the #1 Russian retailer, and highly technically proficient retailing as well. That's right, isn't it, Vlad?
Yeah, Dan, I believe that's right. So at X5, the company has gone a huge evolution over the last 3-4 years in terms of the digital transformation. So one of the big things that happened here was that, the company decided to build a kind of lean startup culture inside. So every single new business line or business unit, so-called, is actually developing as a separate company, from ground up, with a lot of freedom, a lot of kind of, opportunities in financing, M&As. And so a lot of freedom. That's why, we've been seeing a lot of new businesses popping up inside of X5. And, the food tech division, which is out there for 1.5 years, is one of the examples. So it's one of the leading services in the market today. And it's definitely, due to the ecosystem that's been developed inside of X5. So I think it's the leading company in the Eastern Europe, and probably, in Europe in general, in terms of digitalization and understanding and following the modern kind of online trends.
which is very interesting, and we'd love to focus in on the Russian market more. In fact, we have plans to do that in later this summer with Shop Talk. Just before we move on to talk about Jiffy London, one of the interesting things when we were talking prior to the program, Vlad, was how much you were telling me how mature the ultra fast delivery market is in Russia, like India and China. It's quite developed. That's the case, isn't it?
Sure. Yeah, that's right. Then I think, one of the reasons here is that Russia is traditionally seeing a much more developed convenience format market rather than, hypermarket or supermarket. So we have, that roughly half of the kind of food retail market developed in convenience, and we're seeing the most sustainable growth rates in the convenience that kind of shows the way people shop. So they kind of prefer more kind of non-planned, frequent, more kind of impulsive purchasing, just, every couple of days. And that, on the one hand, was driven by, the availability of capital, the availability of kind of properties, the number of cars per families, et cetera, et cetera. So people were kind of, it's a more kind of economy-driven market. So people prefer to have less average transaction values, more frequent, so that they can waste less money, less kind of food, and et cetera, et cetera. So with this really significantly translated into the kind of the online space as well, because obviously once you have to build a regular slot delivery format, that's a lot of capital expenditure. Building every fulfillment center is, a lot of money, a lot of technology, a lot of truckings, et cetera, et cetera. So and driven by the consumer demand and capital kind of deficits, our market's been developed in very much in the on-demand space, which actually evolved either small kind of convenience stores into the delivery chain or the dark stores, and it started developing early in 2018. And today, roughly 40% of the e-grocery market of Russia is actually the on-demand deliveries with a delivery between 15 to 45 minutes.
Now, very interesting. Now, Dan, perhaps you could comment before we talk about Jiffy London, just from your perspective as Invenco. I mean, there's a lot going on in Russia, isn't there?
There is, and I think they're a good market to demonstrate what innovation is really driving in consumer demand. So this shifting of this concept of a hypermarket to something that is super local and super fast really changes the way the consumers can shop.
Yeah, well, let's take a look at what your plans are for London. So obviously, not only are you got you're a busy guy, Vlad. Not only have you got these existing responsibilities at X5, but you're one of the founding members with some very interesting colleagues with a lot of experience of Jiffy in London. So let's talk a bit about Jiffy. Perhaps we could show a couple of images which we've just taken from some of the stuff you've written.
Yep, that's correct. Just probably, as a core concept, I think, obviously we've been in the on-demand space for years now, so, roughly close to 4 years just in the on-demand space. Before that, overall around 15 years in e-commerce in Eastern Europe in general. So I was going to be one of the shareholders of several large, noticeable companies in Baltics, in Germany, in Russia as well, and CIS territories. So we know the kind of the logistics side of things, of moving goods from various types of fulfillment centers to the customer, whether that's huge fulfillment centers, building courier deliveries, building huge chains of pickup points, automated pickup points. We've gone through all of this, yeah. And with Jiffy, obviously, as we've been very much kind of scaling during the pandemic and before the pandemic, the on-demand grocery space, we've learned a lot. So we're really passionate about how the distributed fulfillment infrastructure, which is built nearby the consumers, and actually some sort of becoming I would call it an essential urban infrastructure, just like like telecom or water or whatever that is, that's really now kind of part of our lives and it's available on demand. So Jiffy is building the same infrastructure. I think in this space we're going to be seeing multiple business model. We're at the very first days today, and we're kind of building a 1P retailer. So we buy the goods and we sell the goods through our fulfillment facilities. But I think going long term, we're going to be seeing fulfillment providers in this space. So we're going to be seeing someone providing that as a service to the brands. We're going to be seeing this, some sort of a distributed infrastructure for marketplaces. Someone who's going to empower smaller brands to provide rapid delivery, over Amazon.
Yeah, let me just check, because I think just to make sure that our audience understand the differences between what you're doing and what some other operators are doing, because there are some really interesting differences. And because we've had some conversations about this. So it's a 15-minute window which is why it's called ultra fast, because it is ultra fast, which is obviously quite exciting as a format. Dark store, or cloud store as you call them, is the other really interesting bit here. So you believe, you obviously, based upon, as we've been hearing, a lot of experience in the Russian market, that the way to do this is not to, if you like, use other people's stores as your inventory, but to operate, to create your own cloud stores, dark stores, call them what you will, which are very near your customers, basically. And that is how you get much better fulfillment, I guess, order accuracy, and a more profitable model, would you say?
Yeah, that's exactly correct. So it's a small local warehouse. It's a cheaper property usually. So we use various types of property, usually light industrial. Sometimes we use the basement. Sometimes we use the kind of the second floors, which we typically cannot use for the high street. So it's significantly cheaper, on average, like 30% lower cost. Second, that's, it's a cost per operation. So we build the fulfillment centers in a way that they're centric to the fulfillment staff, they're not like a retail showroom. That's why their carry capacity is significantly higher. So usually we hire up to 2.5 times more inventory per square foot than you would typically see in a regular store. So, and then the third point is that we are a full stack operator. That means that we own the staff in the stores. Our staff is typically per hour based, and we constantly work on the utilization rates, meaning the productivity through our technology. And that, consistently drives the cost down for each operation, which I think is not really kind of achievable fulfilling from the regular stores. And point 4 is the substitutions and order accuracy, because I think one of the pain points, when you're kind of trying to fulfill the orders from the stores, is definitely all the unpredictability coming from the inventory accuracy side. So I think dark stores are solving all of that. But what's more, I think over time, we're going to be seeing that the dark store concept would expand to not just the grocery, but a lot of verticals across the consumer products. And that's what we feel particularly exciting about the business model.
Very interesting. Dan, what do you think about that? Because obviously, just thinking about the implications for London and the UK market.
Yeah, the first question that came to mind that drove my interest was, that's like a next level logistical challenge. I'd be interesting to know how you're using technology, because again, new technologies are available now to help solve those kinds of problems. How are you using technology to solve that logistical challenge?
Sure. I think, one of the things is that we are kind of a customly built software company as usual, because in the e-commerce space, once you want to reach all those crazy speeds and flexibility, is usually about a custom built software. That's one thing. The second thing is that, we are fully automated in terms of every single operation or system. So every single employee in the fulfillment process has a mobile app, either whether that's a PDA or a smartphone, where they kind of, consistently interact with the system and just gonna work through the processes that are there. So both in the fulfillment and on the delivery side, we have our own kind of mobile apps, where we're placing algorithms that kind of allow us to route the orders within the territories, optimize the kind of the routes the courier is going to run through. We optimize the routes both in the warehouse and outside of the warehouse. So we're gonna kind of optimize everything going down to the customer preferences, trying to understand what sort of kind of preferred contact points we're having, what is the kind of instructions to reach the house, and et cetera, et cetera. So that's all implemented into the system. And I think that's the crucial part of how we can actually kind of evolve with the efficiency. Because I think the key point here with the local dark store model is that actually our logistics is built around the loops, because we have a central point, which is a dark store, and then we have couriers that are running across the same territory. So they're mostly connected to the store. That's why in the dark store space, we're actually we have an opportunity to batch the orders much more frequently than you would typically see in, let's say, a food delivery business or taxi hailing business, for sure. And that's been very much powered by our software. So we're able to give a courier up to 3 orders per ride. That significantly decrease our cost per order, and then increases the delivery time. So that's all on custom built software.
So that image that we can perhaps just pull up again, which showed that sort of very narrow radius, territorial radius, is pretty important in understanding the potential of your model, right, Vlad?
Sure. Right now, it's actually 2 miles radius, and I think going long term, what we've seen in the kind of largest cities in Russia, where we have this service in a mature phase, we're actually decreasing the mileage. So over time, our average kind of ride per courier decreases from, let's say, we start with something like 2.5 miles at the beginning when we have low density of orders, and it drives down to 0.5 miles over time. Once you're having a lot, more customers nearby the stores, in knowing your brand and interacting with you. So we think this is particularly exciting, because the true network effect in this business comes when you start kind of splitting those delivery zones in halves and halves and halves. And at the end of the day, in the most established territories, you end up with a store serving something like 20,000 households. That's when you already have enough demand to break even and to pay back your store pretty quickly.
Very interesting. How easy is it to find? Obviously, it's easier to find a site for a cloud store or a dark store than it is a regular store.
Sure.
How easy is it to find those sites, though, in the right? Because you have to be in exactly the right place, following your logic just now, don't you, to make it really successful?
Well, I think, we live in a world where the hardest thing to find is the customer usually, because I think that, we as a customers are targeted by so many services, and, our mind is usually so much blown with all types of advertising. So I think the key challenge in this is to actually train the customer to understand this kind of service proposition, and then, switch their top of mind from, when I need things urgently, I go to a store, rather than, open a mobile app and get something in 15 minutes. So I think that's the most challenging part. Well, everything, when you ask about the property side, I think there are definitely, certain territories in London where you originally have no or very limited amount of commercial property. That's true. But the majority of the kind of areas, boroughs in London, they have a lot of opportunities across, the light industrial or retail sector. The good side of our business model is that, if we compare ourselves to high street retailers, we don't need to kind of fight for each store. We don't need to open, sometimes stores across the street just because we don't want our competitors to open a store next to us. And we think that, sometimes 2 stores across the street would make more profit than if a competitor sits there and cannibalizes us. And we've seen that multiple times across, many markets in the world. So we can open the stores where we want, and we can just target, the amount of households which we believe can actually make our stores efficient. So with this in mind, we are very flexible, and there are territories in London where we already today are seeing multiple opportunities, 100 meters one from another. So that's definitely have not been the limiting factor. And we think what's particular about UK is the share of institutional investors owning, every type of property, including the small space. So there is an opportunity to open, to close big deals that cover, some of the locations nationwide, and etc. So that's been very good for us so far.
Well, just before we move to the next segment, Vlad, where are you've just opened 7 days ago? I think you opened your first dark store, didn't you? And what? Just tell us quickly what your next steps are after that.
Sure. Yeah, we opened the first store in Waterloo area. Now we're opening a couple of more stores that's going to be in Lambeth and Bethnal Greens. So I think, our goal by end of this year is to have the coverage of predominantly entire territory of London. We're going to move out in a couple of tier 2 cities, and we just, we're going to, as we kind of develop our processes and opening the stores and everything, I think there's going to be a couple of cities where we're just going to cover them overnight, opening the entire delivery zone. So I think that, just a muscle that has to be trained by a local team in the UK. So, but we're seeing this service going nationwide in one way or another. That doesn't mean that, the logistics process will be similar in London or somewhere kind of in the greater London territories. There's going to be differences for sure, but we are there to just learn it and find the most efficient way to serve the customer.
Well, Vlad, you're a busy guy. We really appreciate you sharing some of what you're doing with us. We'd love, by the way, to talk to you about what's happening in Russia and really look at a mature market as opposed to figuring out where the UK is going to go. So I'll knock on your door about that in the future. But thank you very much for joining us.
Thanks for hosting me. Thank you very much.
Great.
Thanks, Vlad.
Thank you, Vlad. Well, Dan, pretty interesting, eh?
Yeah, I think it's interesting to see how those markets evolve like that, and that people rise to the challenge to leverage technology in order to deliver on new consumer demands.
Tell us. Let's bring on Craig Panther for the next section, and then we can perhaps just talk a little bit about Invenco and what you guys do. Maybe welcome Craig first of all. 2:30 a.m. in Hawaii, so we're very pleased you could join us.
Thanks, Dan, and congratulations on your 1-year anniversary. This is an amazing platform, and I'm a big fan.
I really appreciate
it. Great to be a part of the 1-year show.
Yeah, well, thank you both guys. Dan, just tell us about Invenco in terms of what you do, just to introduce you properly, and we'll talk a little bit about that.
Sure. So around the world, most people would know Invenco from our outdoor payment technology. So the things that you would use to pay with a fuel transaction at a petrol pump with your credit card, we developed that technology around the world. But for the last few years, we've been engaged in building a whole new set of cloud managed products and services, both for delivering new customer engagement technologies, as well on some secure retail capabilities. And we serve a lot of markets around the world. So we're in Europe, we're in the Middle East, we serve Southeast Asia, Australia, of course, with our headquarters in New Zealand, we have a significant preference there, as well as North America.
Indeed. Now, just thinking about today's episode, Dan and Craig. So we've got your sandwich between Jiffy, who obviously have expertise out of the Russian market. So it's not just Jiffy, is it? We need to think about X5 maybe in terms of all that knowledge, which makes it pretty interesting, I think. And then we're going to hear from MOL Group on their digital strategy. Obviously, a lot of the work you guys have done has been in the roadside, we call the roadside retail sector. I mean, what are the in a digitally disrupted world, what are the big challenges for our sector? And we're going to be hearing about some exciting stuff from MOL later, but looking generically across the industry, Craig, what are some of the big challenges for our sector here?
Yeah, I mean, it's been a little bit over a year since the pandemic. And I think one of the things that's really highlighted was our inability in general, and there are some exceptions to this, but our inability to innovate and adapt quickly. So the pandemic really forced the industry to look at different channels, different customer engagements, things like curbside pickup, contactless payments, new ways to engage with the customers. And the platforms that underpin the industry in general do not enable that to be done efficiently and quickly. So the winners out of this are the ones that had platforms that are agile. The losers or the laggards, I don't call them losers yet, but the laggards have platforms that are very coupled and monolithic. So I think that's one of the major points that has really been highlighted throughout the pandemic.
Yeah, I talk to a lot of CEOs who get very frustrated about the ability to move quickly. The other thing I've heard recently is some CEOs who say that they've actually been a bit disappointed how quick, how much traction they've got from some of their digital initiatives. And do you think that's again due to some of the issues they have around the existing platforms?
Yes, I do in part. So I think the major thing is many of the platforms out there today are provided by a very small set of suppliers, and they're built on legacy. And when I say legacy, I'm talking about 20-year-old platforms where APIs and concepts of open platforms really didn't exist. This even predates a lot of the standards that have been built by Connexus and IFSF and all the industry bodies that have made a lot of traction on making that better. But there's still a lot of legacy coupling that's happening in our industry that prevents the agility that you see in other segments like QSR and hospitality, and their ability to adapt during the pandemic was almost overnight. And then also you look at kind of the greenfield platforms like Jiffy and Vlad just presented. It's very easy for those modern systems to adapt. The one thing we have to look at is how do we get through the legacy, and it doesn't need to necessarily be a rip and replace scenario. It can be done in an incremental way and step by step, and aligning to the long-term business initiatives and the threats to our industry.
And is the forecourt sector as a whole, disadvantaged when you get this disintermediation from operators that can just start up overnight, and do something which is very popular with the customers?
Well, I'm actually not that pessimistic about the next 5 years for our industry. I think that you have to break down, and outside the pandemic, there are other disintermediation threats to the industry. I know we have new customer expectations. The customers are looking for personalization, frictionless payments, mobility. Then we have all these new emerging payment standards, QR code payments, Bitcoin, all these method of payments that our industry is going to have to adapt to, in addition to vehicle energy delivery. So you have concepts such as EV charging, which if the industry is not careful, whoever owns that ecosystem will control the customer experience on your own real estate. So I think the pandemic could be a blessing in disguise to our industry, as it will highlight where we need to get ready for the next 10 years, and how we potentially failed this last 1 year, and how we need to actually start to decouple all these technologies and move forward with open API standards moving forward.
Makes sense, Dan?
Yeah, I was thinking to myself as he was talking about that the changes in energy delivery, the move towards electric vehicles, or even this move we just talked about with Vlad of immediate food delivery. And if you think about convenience locations, they're in an ideal spot to be able to provide those types of capabilities from a location perspective. But the reality is that the technology that has evolved that allows us to deliver on these types of new opportunities, they're just tools. So I thought Vlad made an interesting point in that it's when you can engineer and shape those tools to deliver on that new customer need that you actually deliver on that value. And I think that's what the next 5 years holds for us.
So I guess, one of the big questions is what does our industry need in order to have to gain that agility, which is what customers are looking for. I don't know who wants to take that, Craig or Dan.
Yeah, I mean, I think we can potentially tag team this a little bit, but one of the taglines our firm has is secure digital agility. What that means really is you can be agile and digitally agile and have these systems, but our industry has a lot of things to consider in terms of security, payment security with PCI, GDPR, all these types of things that we really, as the industry comes into these new paradigms, really has to take care of the security aspect. So that can be a hindrance in terms of the overall ability to be digitally agile, but we can take it step by step and really try to align our digital transformation journeys into these disintermediation threats, so that we can really start to plan out an incremental roadmap year by year for the next 5 years that will hopefully be future-proof to all these threats coming into our space.
Makes a lot of sense. Well, Craig, why don't you stay and listen to where MOL Group are with their digital strategy, and Dan, we can talk to István and find out how they're getting on, because I think it's a very nice segue into looking at another case study now. So Craig, thank you very much for joining us. It's you can go and get your surfboard now and head to the beach.
Absolutely. Mahalo.
Surf's up.
Good morning. I'm not sure what to say, Craig, but thank you for joining us. Let's welcome István Mag from MOL Group. István, you're the head of Digital Factory. Now we can't just leave that job title there. We just have to have an explanation. I love it, and I kind of know why you've chosen it. I think because but tell us why MOL came up with that job title first of all.
Thank you, Dan, and hello everyone. Congrats on the anniversary, and thanks for inviting me. Digital Factory, I think there's a simple explanation there. We have decided to combine the business and IT teams into one team. so that we can be agile and effective in our delivery of IT and business capabilities. I do believe that without this combination of business and IT, it's really impossible to deliver the speed that the guys before me were talking about. So that's for us this agile concept that's represented by the digital factory here.
Makes sense to you, Dan?
Yeah, cool idea.
Well, István, what did you think of listening to what Jiffy were doing, and obviously thinking about the Russian market, which sits behind some of their strategy?
Yeah, it's fascinating what the guys have done, and for our industry and for companies like us with the huge legacy systems, very monolithic, the speed Jiffy is talking about is just really seemingly out of this world. But we are trying to catch up, and that's one of the reasons why we have established also a digital factory.
Absolutely. Well, let's find out about it. Before we go into your slides, because we've got a few slides, let's just show a few images of one of your stores, which caught a few people's attention because of some of the great, design ideas. Now, we go through a few pictures, but Fresh Corner is something that you've rolled out to, I think, about 1,000 of your 1,900 sites, right? I mean, it's been a big success for you, hasn't it, István?
Yes, thank you very much. Obviously, this site, is most famous for the solar tree and the solar panels on the roof. But yes, it does have a Fresh Corner. Fresh Corner is a gastro and non-fuel concept, and yes, it's available in 1,000 locations, and it has driven a huge growth in our non-fuel sales, and customers like it. So we actually, keep on extending it, and hopefully we'll be covering many more sites with this new concept. You can see here how it looks. I think it's very modern, and it's been just a huge push to our business. You will also see some of that in the numbers later on.
Great. Well, why don't you tell us about your digital strategy? We'd like to, obviously, based upon a lot of what we discussed, we'd just like to see what you're doing, which is exciting and different, because we're very impressed with it.
Thank you very much. I would put it in a larger context, if you don't mind, and I would start with our 2016 strategy. What we announced, it's called Enter Tomorrow. And that was our strategy for 2030, actually. And as part of that strategy, I think is a really important milestone that retail was separated from downstream. And that was for the purpose of the ability to focus on the customers, on the individual customers. And at that time, MOL Group has announced the vision to become a true consumer goods retailer beyond the leading fuel retailer, and also to lead the revolution of the transportation or mobility in the Central Eastern European region. Now, we have made a lot of strides actually in implementing this strategy. For example, with the Fresh Corner, I just want to mention that by now we are actually selling 50 million cups of coffee in Central Eastern Europe, with which we are the largest coffee retailer in the region. And this again, thanks to Fresh Corner. And also in mobility, we started a number of businesses like car sharing, fleet management, and we also acquired a bus manufacturing company. So we are building a lot of capabilities in order to drive that mobility transformation. But actually, what's also very clear is that without digital capabilities, you can't succeed in the long run. Neither in becoming a consumer goods retailer or actually leading the mobility transformation. So that's why we started this digital transformation, and that's why we started the digital factory. We started to develop the digital strategy and some capabilities in 2018, and actually we started to scale massively in 2020 when we have launched our e-learning platform. We call it eSmart for our frontline, and we started our new loyalty program, digital loyalty rewards program in Croatia, which you also featured, by the way, on global convenience stores. So that's the starting point. And actually, since then, it was actually in February when we have announced an update to our strategy, which we developed in 2016. And now the updated vision for consumer services says that we aim to become a digitally driven consumer goods retailer and an integrated complex mobility service provider by 2030. So there you go. That's the role of digital. We want digital to drive the business going forward, and that's why the digital factory is central to delivering this vision.
Yeah.
When it comes to if we can go a little bit further, when it comes to what this strategy means in terms of the numbers, we have achieved since 2016 50% growth in our margins. We want to continue that growth going forward. And that growth is massively still and has been and still going to be driven. Plus, a bit in a slower pace, but also a little bit of fuel and some acquisitions of sites. We want to grow our sites from 1,900, as you mentioned, approximately to 2,200 by 2025. And when it comes to digital, I mean, at least my main KPI is the number of active loyalty customers. So that's what we want to grow from 3 million to 4.5 million, obviously followed by the increasing penetration of loyalty transactions.
Let me just stop you, István, on those numbers, because obviously you're tracking numbers of active loyalty customers, loyalty transaction penetration very carefully, aren't you? Why is that so important as a success factor?
Yes, I mean, loyalty is one of the engine to drive our business. And when we look at the pillars of our strategy, that's on the following slide. One of the main pillars is the diversification of sales channels. And what we mean by that, what we mean by diversification of sales channels is that we want to be much more active in our communication with our current customers beyond the retail side. So obviously leveraging digital channels to bring those customers in, increase their frequency, increase their relationship, the breadth and depth of their relationship with us. Digital and the loyalty program is an immensely important tool for that. But then if you look at the other ambitions that we have, which is exploiting the synergies between retail and mobility and bringing these different service lines on the same platform and then launching e-commerce, this is all built on loyalty in the future. Loyalty is the platform, both in terms of customers and also in terms of technology, which will then allow us to scale these businesses in the future.
Makes sense to you, Dan?
Yeah, what I was going to say is it was a good question. But I think that, measuring those type of loyalty transactions it addresses one of the challenges that businesses have today about trying to find out how effective is my digital strategy. And I think that's a great key performance indicator of understanding, is my digital offering to these consumers actually driving the business? So that's a great KPI.
Yes, and there are a number of others. It's unfortunately or fortunately, depending on the perspective, but it's quite difficult to measure the success of a digital transformation, right? So we actually break this down to three distinct types of KPIs. One is reach, which in case of digital, it's very important, and this is the how many customers you have, how many application downloads you have. Then the next one is usage. I think it's equally important that you can reach a certain number of people, but what kind of traffic you generate with those people, and how many people are actually using your application is very, 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 very important. And the third one is from that usage, what benefit you are actually delivering to the business. And that's a very specific, very important part of it. And we have developed a number of ways to measure that, from increasing visit frequency, basket size, but yeah, we even have net contribution KPIs and the like. So that's a tremendously exciting area.
Yeah, one other thing that I liked in looking at the mobile application and then looking at the format of your store, which is very inviting, modern. It's a place where customers would like to. So you're really thinking about that customer journey, and I like the way you've approached it end to end.
Yes, for us, the customers are the starting point. And coming back to why loyalty is important, loyalty just enables the understanding about our customers. If you don't have a loyalty program, you don't have that understanding. You don't know, you can't look at customer by customer, what they purchase, why they purchase. There's just no way to optimize properly. And the whole concept for us is coming together really with the being a leading fuel retailer, but actually building the non-fuel business, building the mobility business, and then combining these in on our digital platforms.
Let me just ask you about the mobility word, István, because obviously we hear it a lot. And I know that obviously looking at some of the stuff you've sent through, I know that you feel you've got traction there. You are making progress. I mean, how would you define progress on the mobility side of what you're doing?
Yes, it was right after we announced the strategy, we actually started to develop a number of businesses. One very important business is the car sharing business, which we call Limo. It started in Hungary, and now we have 75,000 users. The other leg is the fleet management business, which is actually a B2B business. But if you think about the long term of mobility, where you have a lot of autonomous cars that might not be owned by individuals, the capability to manage a fleet, to finance the cars, to maintain the cars, to operate the fleet, this is a really important capability, and that's why my boss, who is the EVP of Consumer Services, started to develop this business, and by now we have a quite massive fleet management business with 4,000 cars, and we also want to play a role in public transport. That's why we acquired a public transportation company, a bus manufacturing company. And I mean, if we add up all the kilometers, let's say that we have sold since 2016 through these services, is 400 million. Now, obviously, it's a big number and it has multiple elements, but I think that gives you a kind of a sense of the size of this, and it will massively increase in our expectation in the future. Anyway, we have this notion that in the future we want to actually sell kilometers and not liters or kilowatt hours or tickets or minutes. We would like to sell mobility.
Well, some good numbers. I mean, I asked for numbers and I got some down.
Yeah, I thought that was an interesting discussion. We talked a little bit about how technology disintermediation, when new technology arrives, how it can be used to solve new problems. This whole evolution of autonomous cars is really, it's causing a lot of people's brains to explode on how that might reshape food delivery, transportation. So I like that customers are thinking about that.
Yes, we have to
go on, István. Sorry,
I just wanted to say that it might be a little bit further away, but they will mean a huge disruption for our industry. And if you read the articles from BCG, McKinsey, they're all saying that even service station, the number of service stations can decline by massively 20, 30, 40%, depending on the penetration and how these new ways of mobility will be used. So it's a really big threat. We need to be prepared for that.
Yeah. Just one question on the fleet management. Just how do you define fleet management in your new mobility context? That was just a sort of explanation I was looking for, really.
It's in the traditional sense at the moment. So it's basically we started with our own company, right? Our own company has a lot of cars. And we had a fleet provider who has given us those cars and maintained those cars and operated them. We took that over, and then we started to go out on the market, and we started to provide this service for other companies. So this is really like a basic capability that we are starting to build, and we are expecting that this capability will be useful, very, very useful in the future as mobility changes.
Sure.
It's a very long-term plan, isn't it, Dan? In terms of obviously looking to 2030 and being ready for that, being, I guess, connected to your customers, for the future is absolutely vital, isn't it, in our industry right now?
Yeah, and it's interesting the way that they're looking at it from the logistical challenge, which we talked about with Vlad as well. He's trying to manage these service deliveries in this 2-mile radius. But if you have these autonomous cars, what does that do to that radius? And how does that change your planning? And how do you prioritize where those vehicles are and what they're going to be loaded with? Are they with people or with food? And I think it drives some interesting new challenges that we'll have to solve over the next 20 years. But I think the other good thing that we heard from István was that whole concept of, hey, every few years we're going to relook at this strategy and we're going to make some modifications based upon what's going on in the environment. That's an important concept for your strategy because things are going to change.
Yes, it's hugely important. You need to build for the future, but you also need to deliver short-term value, right? So, and the balancing of that is really, really, really important, actually a difficult task.
Indeed. One of my last questions really, István, was just thinking about you as a business and the markets you're in. Central, Eastern Europe, 10 markets. I mean, in a way, do you have certain unique opportunities in those markets that perhaps other operators wouldn't have in the UK or the US or other markets, you know, to move quickly, you know, because you perhaps don't have the Amazons of this, you know, of this world to compete with yet?
Yes, our opportunity is in the fact that that we are very much just in this tightly knit region, right? And we have a massive scale in this region. So we have actually, you know, the number of customers we have the number of sites, we have the transactions, we have the data, we have the financial arm, which is also very important to move. So and we, as you can see, we fully intend on leveraging it. It's a great opportunity, and you know, and compared to the big players like Shell or BP or any other large companies, for them, Central Eastern Europe is just one of the regions, right? That they're in. For us, this is the region. This is our region, and we want to be the best company in this. We want to be the first choice of our customers in this region.
Well, we love covering, as you mentioned, we've featured MOL Group a lot in Global C-Store Focus because we think you're very innovative and doing some exciting things in, you know, not just on technology, by the way, but also in store design and fresh, you know. So good luck to you, István, sir, and you know, thank you very much for sharing your digital strategy on the program today.
Thank you very much. It was a pleasure.
Thank you, István.
Thank you, Dan. Thank you, Dan.
Great, and thank you, István, and Dan. Appreciate you flying co-pilot today and providing a bit of a technological perspective on some very interesting developments. I mean, it was two great case studies, wasn't it?
Yeah, it absolutely was. And as we were talking through them, I was thinking both companies are thinking the right way, which is you either need to be disrupt or you'll be disrupted. And I like the way that they're focusing on that to change their businesses. Yeah,
you know. I think there's a story there that's going to be interesting to come back to for both businesses, isn't there? Sure. So anyway, thank you very much for joining me today, and we'll look forward to seeing you again soon, I'm sure.
Hey, thank you so much for having me on the 1-year anniversary.
Thanks, Dan.
Take care.
Terrific. Just before we finish today, let me just tell you about what's coming up. As Dan mentioned, Shop Talk Live was born on April 17th. 2020. Since then, our reach has expanded from 0 countries to 80 countries. Over 10,000 executives, retail supplier executives in our industry have watched an episode. So we're very happy about that. Next week, episode 28 is Roadside Retail in the Age of New Mobility, a word that's come up a lot today. That will be 2 p.m. UK time next Friday. Joining me as co-host is a very good old friend of mine, Klaus Mantell, was with ex-Shell Global Head of Convenience Retail, now with McKinsey and Partners in Japan. So Klaus will be joining us from Tokyo. And there's a pre-read of some research that McKinsey have just published on our website. Also joining us from the UK and US, Scott Annan, who's been on the program a number of times, as regulars will know. And Frank Beard, who will make his first appearance. Frank's a very exciting guy in our industry, who will be joining us. They'll be presenting a very interesting report, which has been a lot of coverage on this week, The Shape of Food Retailing in the New Normal 5. And you'll find a pre-read of that ahead of the episode. We'll be focusing on some of the conclusions from that research, which really focuses on some of the the questions about roadside retail and the future. Joining us as a special guest on next week's episode to look at those conclusions is the CEO of Wawa, Chris Geissens. who will be joining us live from Pennsylvania in the US, talking about what WAWA are doing, but also, thinking about some of those conclusions in that new research, which I have to say is very much worth a read. Fascinating insights into the latest developments in our industry and where we need to go, perhaps by 2030. Thank you very much for joining us today. It's been an interesting one, and look forward to seeing you again next week, no doubt. Take care. Bye-bye.